And now let's go to the first session, please. So I call Sharon White, Mrs. Pilar del Castillo, Mr. Elko Bloch, Mr. Xavier Niel, and Mr. Sam Crawford.
Oh, sorry. That's okay.
That's great. Many thanks to Sébastien and Willie, who have set up this session incredibly well. Those of you I don't know, I am Sharon White, and I am the Chief Executive of Ofcom, which is the UK regulator for both telcos, post and broadcasting. I think we're going to have a very, very interesting and lively session this afternoon. As Sébastien has already said, the top priority within BEREC for next year, but also reflected in the discussions on the digital single market, is connectivity. How do we ensure there is take-up, availability of fast networks, and how do we ensure that there is universal application of those fast networks at a point when public expectations are possibly rising even faster than our ability sometimes to invest. I have a fantastic panel this afternoon who I will introduce now. I wanted to start off with Xavier Niel, somebody in the UK who is desperate for new entrants. And Xavier is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Free, which has been an incredibly successful new entrant to the French market. Very much looking forward to hearing from Xavier. I also wanted to introduce Elko Bloch, who's the Chief Executive of KPN, the Dutch telecommunications provider. Also a great story of success in the Netherlands that we will hear about a little bit later. Sam Crawford, to my immediate right, who is the founder of Sam Knows, who many of us around the room will know, probably taken use of your services too, who is a great organisation that's really providing sort of accurate measurement of speed, which is crucial both to investors but also actually to the end consumer. And last but not least, I wanted to introduce Pilar del Castillo, who's a member of the European Parliament, and I think is going to be very busy over the next 18 months, very much involved in the sort of European negotiations around the digital single market. So I think it's a fantastic panel, which I hope will stimulate a very good discussion from everybody on the floor today. Each of the panelists is going to give a 5-minute presentation from the podium. We are then going to move into I hope quite a good time for some in-depth discussion from colleagues, experts in the hall today. I think we've also got some streamed questions and answers from those who are inputting their questions also by email with the wonders of technology today. So hopefully this is going to be a great stimulating afternoon. And can I perhaps start then by welcoming Xavier to the podium?
Thanks for inviting us. Sorry. Our company is Iliad. We are a French operator. We started in 1999 as an ISP in fixed business. Then we went to the DSL, then we came to the FTTH, and now we are a mobile operator in France. We have more than 18 million customers in France. We are doing about 4.5 billion revenue, 1.6 billion EBITDA only in France. We have no debt. We have the highest investment effort in the industry in France, maybe in Europe. We have a capex to sell of about 30%, which means we invest almost 1.5 billion euro in our network in France every year. We have no dividends. And thanks to the European regulation, we have a clear roadmap to become a MNO in Italy. In the case of the merging between Wind and Tre and Italy, we gain access to a remedy package which will allow us to become new mobile operator, and I hope new fixed operator in Italy in the following months. I know we are very special. We like to be altnet, and we like to be new entrant in market and to create competition in this market. I'm also, on my personal basis, investor in telco in a lot of countries. I own a telco business in Israel, which is a very competitive market, in Switzerland, which is less competitive, in Monaco, where it's a monopoly, or in Afghanistan or Singapore. And I like to create new operator in any kind of geography. I think in Europe, we collectively have a key challenge to address something for the benefits of the Europeans. It means, for me, giving access to a new generation access network. So I'm in this telco business. I was in this business for the last 13 years. And when I compare Europe with other geography, I think Europe is doing well compared to the other continents. We have succeeded in opening up the market to competition, and today we can enjoy all its benefits. European digital culture is very advanced in most of our country. Broadband and mobile penetration are very high. Innovation and investment are at a record level. In a context of high price competition, players have to differentiate their offers through investment in network quality and coverage. We have an attractive and affordable offers which are provided to our consumers. And the digital coverage of both mobile and fixed networks are already good, even it can always be improved. From this clear positive picture, we have to lay the path to the future. How can we succeed in providing to the European new generation networks at affordable conditions? We have strong feeling at Free about that. We are totally convinced that competition and investment in connectivity shouldn't be opposed. They are the two sides of the same coin. Competition is a major asset for Europe. We are 100% sure that it will be a terrible mistake to grant incumbents sort of regulatory holidays with the belief that it will be a solution to get NGNs quickly. When I watch the US market, when you have no competition, for example, in the fixed business, you have no investment, and for the consumer, you have bad product at a high level of price. In the telecommunication world, there is a rule of thumb demonstrated over the last 2 decades. Incumbents are investing when they are facing competition. Without competition, they maximize their dividends. In France, altnets account for more than 50% of industry's capex, and they are pushing innovation. Without Free in France, the price for the consumers would have been 2 or 3 times the price they have, and the investment would have been smaller. The purpose of regulation for the near future should be to ensure that both the incumbents and altnets are granted a level playing field to invest. You should also have in mind that deploying NGAs is not only a question of money. We can experiment in France, for example, how easier it was and it is for Orange, due to its legacy and size, to get the architectures and process they want, to use the ducts, for example, to get support from landlords and local authorities to appear as the official network operator. And it's tough in this environment to be an altnet operator. To make it short, 3 very simple ideas. Competition and investment should not be opposed. Incumbents are only a part of the solutions. Altnets have a key role to play. Regulation has to favor competition when it boosts investment in new generation network. In other words, the altnets that are spending capex have to be protected. Having these three ideas in mind, the proposal from the Commission for the review of the telecom framework seems to us very positive. Competition remains at the core of regulation. Nevertheless, we have three main comments for the ongoing review of the framework. First, on the access regulation. We think that the local regulator must retain the relevant tools to impose ex-ante access obligation and not only act in case of failure of commercial negotiation or co-investment. When the incumbent has regained market share, it is already too late as NGS market is not really fluid. Anyways, local regulators must be able to impose sharing when and where it's economically relevant. For FTTH, for sure, but also for mobile in rural areas. Passive access should remain the optimum remedies. It would have been impossible to influence for us to exist without having passive access to the Orange network. Second thing, it's about spectrum. In France, for the time being, we have all the spectrum, and we don't have any new spectrum coming for the following year, but competitive access to spectrum is crucial for a vibrant and sustainable competition. Spectrum must be used where there is a need and not to be an asset the big player can use to withstand competition. In a world in which the incumbent is buying all the spectrum, you cannot have, for sure, any competitors, which means you will not have any competition, which means you will not have any investment. Local regulators should have the power to set the relevant conditions relating to spectrum, caps, renewal. I know it's complicated from a political point of view, and in our country, usually the politics are thinking only to the money they can get from the auction in license, but in some cases, it could be an issue. The last thing is regarding the institutional setup in the EU. Cooperation between the local authority is very important to ensure consistency and good practices among member states. Regulation should nevertheless remain mainly national to take into account the national specificities and ensure that the day-to-day dialogue between stakeholders and regulators is efficient. As a conclusion, the gigabit society will only exist if regulation favors a significant level of competition, which is the only way to push innovation and investment. I can guarantee you, and we can guarantee, that Iliad will play its role and continue to be the maverick which will force its competitors to continue investing in order to differentiate. Thank you.
Xavier, thank you so much indeed. A very powerful message about the huge driver of competition for investment, but also I thought a very carefully carved route for regulation there, which we will discuss, I'm sure, in more detail later. Can I now welcome Ilko Block, please?
Sharon, thank you. And good afternoon. I'm delighted to be invited to speak at this roundtable session. KPN is the largest provider of telecommunication networks and services in the Netherlands, and you see some key information about KPN on this slide. As an introduction to our discussion later, I want to share with you the current state of the Dutch digital society, what we did at KPN to achieve this current state, what we are doing to maintain this position, and how regulations could support building the gigabit society. The Netherlands and the Dutch people tend to be very adaptive to change. They want to be at the forefront of innovation and expect to be connected by the latest technologies. Next generation access, such as fiber, VDSL, DOCSIS 3.0 and 4G is already well developed in the Netherlands and covers almost the entire country. As you can see, the Netherlands is doing very well on digital economy and society and time spent on LTE, particularly due to its leading position in connectivity. KPN is proud to present these scores, as we have done much to contribute to this situation. The next slide shows that KPN has invested already heavily in the Netherlands between 2011 and 2015. This amounted to a total of almost 8 billion euro, including investments in fiber to the home. Today we have 30% coverage of fiber to the home in the Netherlands. That means that 30% of the households are already connected to fiber to the home, and excluding 1.3 billion in spectrum. With this investment effort, KPN has been ahead of the curve in Europe. KPN has been able to roll out our 4G network to virtually all of the Netherlands, both in population and geography, ahead of the demand for mobile data, utilizing our good spectrum position. On fixed networks, the graph on the right-hand side of this slide demonstrates that customers perceive KPN as best in class in terms of networks and services in the Netherlands. Resulting from our investment-led strategy, we have deep fiber penetration throughout the Netherlands. With around 80% of the country covered with fiber or fiber-based technology by the end of this year, we have a fiber line going into almost every neighborhood in the country. And this has led to almost 3/4 of our customers already having access today to more than 100 megabits per second. KPN's fixed investment program for 2016 and the years after focuses on investments on fiber to the curb. For example, the rollout of our next copper technology of bonded V+ will drive another doubling of the available download speed to the speeds of 400 megabits per second. Supported by an excellent backbone and high fiber penetration, this only requires a simple software upgrade for the majority of our customers. This gives us the opportunity, when customer demand changes, to respond rapidly and efficiently by increasing bandwidth where needed. So, while fiber to the home has been the talk of the town over the past years, fiber to the curb can bring high-speed connectivity to our customers in a much faster and cost-competitive way. We believe this agile approach has greatly contributed to the current state of Dutch connectivity and has created the fundamentals for our gigabit society. Being a heavily regulated sector, we believe the regulators should support us in further developing the gigabit society. The investments by KPN are done in a very competitive market, both horizontally between operators and also vertically between operators, OTT players, handset manufacturers, and content owners. In our view, supportive regulation should focus on 3 key items: a level playing field, faster access to and harmonization of frequency allocation, and last but not least, same service, same rules. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much indeed. I suspect many of us around the room are looking at the connectivity stats for the Netherlands with a great deal of envy, but it's come about not through accident, but through a very particular environment, which we will discuss later. Thank you so much. I then wanted to move on to Sam Crawford, who will give us a slightly different perspective in terms of the measurement and confidence in terms of the delivery of our networks. Thank you, Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Hi, my name's Sam Crawford. I am the founder and CTO of a small London-based company called Sam Knows, and in case you hadn't heard of us, what we do is we provide end-to-end broadband measurement services for regulators and ISPs all around the world. We work a lot in Europe with some of the regulators here, some of the ISPs here as well, and also in many, many other markets all over the world, such as Brazil, right the way across to Singapore, Mongolia, even America, Canada, many, many different markets. So for us, it's, whilst this is really our home turf, and we know an awful lot about Europe and the UK market in particular, we've also had a great deal of experience of both the technical and the regulatory markets in many, many other markets too. So I'm hoping we can bring some of that perspective here as well. So a little bit about us. We're about a 5 or 6 year old company. We focus very, very heavily on providing very accurate, very robust and very reliable measurements so that the regulators and the ISPs we work with, i.e. our customers, can make very informed and reliable decisions based upon that data. Because after all, if you can't measure it, then you certainly shouldn't be spending money on it. We do a lot of measurements in both the fixed line and in the mobile space. We're probably most well known for our work in the fixed line space with a device that we call the white box, which conducts measurements autonomously of end users' fixed line access performance. And our main message when we first launched the company was that it's not just about speed. We wanted to move the conversation beyond speed and look at many, many other characteristics such as latency and packet loss, and increasingly nowadays, the conversation is moving beyond that too, and I'll return to that shortly. So, like I mentioned, we have a lot of history working in many different markets. As you might guess from the accent, I'm from the UK, and I was still a teenager when local loop unbundling was still being mooted as an idea. So I kind of grew up in an environment where competition was entrenched. It was a very, very good thing. But since then, I've been doing a lot of work, or we as a company have been doing a lot of work in markets where there is much less competition. One of the previous speakers brought up the US market as an example, and that's very true. There are many places where you can only purchase broadband or mobile services from a single operator, and in many other parts of the country, you can only buy it from 2 operators. It's very, very different to what we're used to here in Europe. I would say on the legislative side of things, there's an increasingly amount of focus these days, both in Europe and abroad, on legislating what is minimum levels of service for key network level quality of service measures such as throughput, latency, packet loss, jitter perhaps. And we see in many, many different implementations of this in different markets. So in the US, you have the Open Internet Order. In Brazil, I don't recall the name of it, but they have legislation for both fixed and mobile networks, and the implementation of these is very, very different. Brazil is very, very, very heavy penalties if operators do not meet these metrics, these KPIs that have been set out. And other markets do similar kind of things, and it's very, very interesting to see the different effects that this has had on the market. You could certainly argue it's not had quite the impact that they might have hoped for, whereas some of the other markets we work in, there's a much more positive message about speed is improving, and this is fostering innovation and investment in the market as well, particularly as you open it up for competition too. So I suppose one thing I just wanted to mention and perhaps leave us with is we need to be mindful of the future when talking about incoming regulation. So right now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of focus on network level quality of service measures. Increasingly, we're seeing both our ISP and regulatory customers moving towards not just covering quality of service, but also quality of experience, looking at individual applications and how they perform, because speed on the access network to the user's home is one thing, but application performance for key OTT video services, websites, content being streamed from other markets, that frankly is one of the main one of the main uses of the internet for many users. So measuring that performance and being mindful of that as a use case which is only increasing and will continue to only increase is extremely important in our eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to BEREC for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today. Let me underline at the very beginning that well, the debate on the review of the regulatory framework in Parliament has still not started. So indeed, we still have not parliamentary rapporteurs, has to be attributed the dossier. But in that sense, you can understand that you have to read me as just a preliminary views from my side. Is all I can contribute today, and not so much on behalf of Parliament or expressing how the debate is going on. I will limit myself to the recast directive. Well, the so-called Code for Electronic Communication, European Code for Electronic Communication, leaving aside other legislative proposals which are part of the same package. I know one of those is the one affecting BEREC, which for different reasons of the past I also feel very involved with. Maybe in the debate we have some opportunity to come back to this one, but I'm not going to refer this only to those related to the code. I think to understand that it is necessary to see where we are. I know you know much better where we are in the digital context, but sometimes it's good to refresh how things were when the previous framework, regulatory framework, was adopted. Not when was designed, it still was 2 years in advance, but only when was adopted. That was 2009. From 2009 to now, the digital environment and the digital evolution has dramatically changed. We were in a time in which the telecom sector had their own very well defined frontiers, determined by the telephony and access to basic internet functionalities. And that was practically all in some way. Today, not necessary to say in front of such an audience, but let me underline again that we are far beyond that scenario. Well, we are in I will say fully, but quite close to be more and more fully a network society in which Europe has the potential. This is the sense of the European Union. It has very much to be with the single markets, and in this case, with the digital single market that explains to a great extent, not only for political reasons, but also for this reason, the need for having such an instrument, such an area which is the European Union. And I must say that it is a determinant on will be the future of the European Union. It has a lot to be with the capability we have at the end to really build a big common interest through the European market, in this case through the digital single market. This has not only consequences for the economy such as, but for the whole, let's say, political project of the European Union as well. Well, in this new context, there is no need to say that for achieving the new goals, high connectivity everywhere and for everyone is critical. And for this reason, at least for me, I think we must congratulate the Commission for elevating to a core objective of the EU regulatory framework the availability and take-up of very high-capacity connectivity. We have not to forget that together with this, still is there competition, and of course, consumer rights, but still is there competition. Among the proposals that I believe do represent a good step forward achieving the connectivity goals, let me just mention the strengthening of the proportionality requirements when mandating access regulation. In particular, the draft proposal explicit provides that wholesale access regulation cannot be imposed on SMP operators in the absence and end users harm. And on the other hand, the requirement for NRAs to first consider mandating access to civil engineering, such as ducts and poles, and to impose other access remedies only if they conclude that would be not sufficient achievement of the objectives of the regulatory framework. I must say that in this sense, in my view, the access regulation proposals do not revolutionize the existing regime, which is solid and well established, but make a subtle, you can say subtle, well, in my view, is subtle shift in the emphasis to promote investment in network. No? Well, just to finalize, 3 points. One is the one that has to be with proposal for co-investment. I think there is a need in part, to debate, there is a room for debate if the measure that the Commission has proposed really stimulate that kind of co-investment. The requirements and the proper one must to be retuned, refined, changed, and so on and so forth. So that will be present, I'm sure, in parliamentary debates. And, the level playing field, this is one almost iconic, item that it is, for a long time present in the debate, but it is there. I think service provider for similar service offering must be treated equally. This is the principle. But what I consider is still, something that must be debated is on the technical feasibility of some of the measures, and on the other hand, we must not forget. On the one hand, to forget, but to debate on this technical feasibility. Maybe are not the best one. Maybe it's not going to really achieve the goal that they try to reach. And on the other hand, which is also, and I will insist in Parliament in the debate in that, is that we have not to forget that deregulation for all, in some cases, it might be the best option, the best solution. So altogether must be in this debate of the level playing field. Finally, that's the last, on the spectrum. That's kind of, the always persecuted, desirable aspect in terms of a high level of coordination at the European level, but always with the same answer by member states, by Council. Always, please don't touch it. We have the ownership. No one discussed that. Is there? No one discussed that the money that you can get through for the public budget through spectrum, natural spectrum auction, and so it is for member states. There is not any room for debating that, but it still is the same room for debating and take decisions in a number of aspects which will, boost the possibilities for the electronic communication sector to better develop in the European Union. There's a number of things that the Commission has proposed, proposals. Many of them, they were in the original TSM dated in 2013, as you know. In the TSM, Council denied to enter into the debate, so finally it was only roaming and net neutrality, as you remember. Again, this proposal and some of new ones like, the the license, minimum license duration, which Commission has established in 25 years, which originally Parliament on the TSM will talk about and ask for 30 years. And so we have to come back to this and many other things which I am not to spend more time on this because we need to go to the question time. Just my last message it is that we have an opportunity. We are in the European Union, we have all the time opportunities. The problem is that many of those times we really don't really find and execute the right answer and the right decisions for those opportunities to be a reality. That's, you know, that's something which is constant in our history, not only this sector, but in many others. So this is a sector, the electronic communication one, that needs an update, that needs to really refurnish in some way the context in order to have you know, the best environment to fully seize all the opportunities, and we must not fail. For the European institution, it's a must, and I am sure that we will be, you know, exactly where we have to be in terms of the final outcome to really have the right response to this. Okay, thank you very much.
Pilar, thank you so much indeed. It's a very eloquent setting out of where the current state of discussions are. We have about 3/4 of an hour or so for an open discussion. Now, I'm assured that questions to panel members are going to appear by screen, but I also wonder whether if colleagues have got questions directly on the floor and we have some microphones, perhaps we can gather 2 or 3 questions to start off with. Terrific. I can see one to my right, and when the microphone comes to you, can you say who you are and just express your question or comment as succinctly as you can?
I'm Kane Mumford from the Spectrum Management Newsletter Policy Tracker. I've got 2 questions, if that's okay. The first one is for Sharon. I was wondering if the European Union has, you know, kind of repeatedly tried to kind of take control of spectrum harmonization measures, and Ofcom might not be in favor of this, but I was wondering if it might be in favor of voluntary coordination of kind of of award processes. And my second question is for Pilar. I was wondering if you think the European Parliament will support the coordination of the submitting of draft proposals on award processes to a centralised BEREC sort of body to review it. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think just to be clear on the 2 questions, I think the first question was to me, thank you, which is whether Ofcom has a view about processes, the proposals for coordination of spectrum. We are very relaxed about greater coordination. I think as Pilar has already set out, there is clearly a debate about the degree of sort of more sort of European intervention is not quite the right word, but more European sway. But that's a debate we are keen and will have over the coming months of the DSM. And I think the second question to Pilar was on the specific issue of the proposal that BEREC is made into an agency of a European agency rather than a more informal grouping.
Okay, well, you want to be the first one?
On the first, as I say, we're pro-coordination, and that's probably as far as we would see any next step.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I go to next. I'm so sorry because we cannot really hear very well from here. Maybe okay. You have always to again said which one the questions are but now it's clear. It's BEREC. Well, previously to this debate, this morning at 11, we had another debate organized by WIC, you know, which more or less, and you can imagine was, you know, more the same in some way, was more or less. It was the chair of BEREC present with me, I mean, and with Anthony William from the Commission, and when BEREC came to the, let's say, to the opinion, reflection, and questions, the chair of BEREC, well, very nicely, well, addressing me, and he said, you, as the mother of BEREC, do you think BEREC has not delivered properly? Do you think that, and it's not. I mean, I believe that we had the right decision not to have an agency as it was proposed in 2007, and it was not finally adopted in 2009. I think a kind of step forward from what it was kind of not very much coordinated without specific resources and so of the race. That was a real you know, improvement, BEREC, and I think BEREC has gained a lot of credibility. I have to tell you the truth. With my colleagues in Parliament and with the number of stakeholders, BEREC, for example, in debating net neutrality, everyone was, okay, let's see what BEREC has to say. And there was, you know, an attitude and a perception of, well, this institution is something that we can trust about, you know, because, and I think it's like that. But as the chair remember at that time, when this morning, BEREC is 6 years old now, and it's not the same. I mean, when you have 6 years, you have different needs, which are new ones, respected when you was born. So the idea of keeping the independent nature of BEREC, which I think is fundamental, is crucial, then that will be interesting together to see what kind of new development can, you know, improve at the end of the day, you know, that view, which is the one of the European Union, of the single markets, and not the national one in which the regulator had been, you know, are acting, you know. So I think, let's see if we can find, based on the Commission or in new proposals, we can find some kind of...
I'm actually going to, thank you, Peter. I'm actually going to suggest we move on because I suspect we're going to have lots and lots of questions from the floor. I've got a couple that have come through by email, for which thanks, and I'm going to take them in reverse order. The first question is about whether fibre should be at the heart of operators' connectivity strategy. And actually the question is ambiguous, is unclear as to whether it's fibre to the curb, as Ilko has argued rather strongly, whether it's fibre to the premise, where we've got duct and pole access in a number of our countries. I'd be interested in the panel's brief comments as to whether we should move strongly away from technology neutrality, which there have been some interesting rumbles that we should, or whether actually it's up to each operator to choose his or her investment strategy. Xavier, do you want to start off, please?
Yes, fiber is the end game. For the next 50 years, we know that we will have to use fiber. We will have 4G, 5G, 6G, 7G, 8G, but we still have behind fiber, and for fixed business, we will need, of course, the fiber. So it's the end game. FTTC is the start game, but at the end, you will have FTTH from everywhere to everywhere. So it means that today, if for an operator, if he doesn't gain access to fiber, it will not exist in 5 or 10 years. So which means that we need a lot of regulation to allow, of course, the incumbents, but they have a big advantage because they own the ducts, they own all the infrastructure, all the information to deploy this fiber. But so it's why we need regulations which allow AltNet to deploy and to have access to passive fiber network all around every country in Europe.
Great, fantastic. Sam, what's your perspective?
I think Sorry. To take the question very literally, yes, fibre absolutely needs to be at the heart of an operator's connectivity strategy, whether you're talking about FTTH, fibre to the curb, fibre to the apartment block, whatever. Ultimately, as we know with 5G that's coming up, the range of it is ultimately going to be a lot shorter than 3G or even 4G. So we're going to need fibre much deeper towards the edge, towards the home. So, and ultimately, eventually, it will get to the home. So, in a nutshell, yes.
Great, that's very clear. Thank you. Peter?
Maybe, because I was just intervening, I will let
Ilko, do you want to go next?
In my view, we should discuss the fastest and most efficient way to provide all customers with high-speed broadband. And of course, fiber plays a very important role in that. But it starts with the customer and to be able to offer high-speed broadband to the customers. And then you talk about fiber to the curb in certain situations, fiber to the building, fiber to the home, and also you should not forget DOCSIS 3.0 from cable, because at the end, it's competition that drives the speed of high-speed broadband.
Thank you.
Well, I will repeat exactly, well, it's more or less the same answer, but in the same words, what the last speaker has said. I think it's exactly that. It was the one that can really better respond to the new demands. And well, it could be, you know, something new in a few years or more, but then now we are where we are. So this doesn't necessarily mean that the others has not played a role, because, you know, they are present. So you have to optimize, you know, what you have now. But in terms of future, more or less, it is like that. I mean, cannot be denied.
One example, when 5 years ago somebody would have told me that in 2016 KPN would be able to offer, using their copper network, 400 megabit download speeds on the existing copper network, I would have started laughing. And today, in our network, we are able to offer 400 megabit download speeds just using, well, it's the last part, it's fiber to the curb, and just 500-600 meters, 400 megabit download speeds using our existing copper network. And I'm convinced that in the next 5 years, copper technologies will continue to evaluate and giving us the opportunity to offer even higher bandwidth speeds.
I think this is very interesting. I mean, Sam will be at the forefront of this in terms of your point about measuring speed as well as reliability. And I think this is where you have a very interesting debate as to whether it is entirely, we're entirely agnostic about technology when you think about reliability, quality of service as well as speed. I wanted to move to the next question, which I think is implicitly a bit of a challenge to Pilar's comment during her presentation, that the new telco proposals are not a revolution in terms of access regulation, but are about putting more focus on investment. And I wanted again to come to, Pilar could maybe agree with herself. So perhaps I might ask the other panel members, perhaps starting with Ilko, as to whether that's how you see the proposals coming out for the telecoms regulation as a sort of evolution that's going to help you support your next tranche of investment.
In my view, well, looking at how we are taking decisions, investing in either fixed, mobile, fiber, upgraded copper, it's about customer demand and the return we can make on our investments. And if there's an environment created that we can make a return with a longer term perspective in, well, fixed connectivity, then given the position in the market, we will for sure take a decision to invest in fiber, being it fiber to the curb or fiber to the home or whatever. And of course, customer demand needs to be there, but looking at the huge growth in data, customer demand is there. So it's at the end, can you make a reasonable return out of your investments.
And you see the proposals as something which is going to allow you to do this? I'm going to ask you to come off the fence a little bit.
I'm not sure, because it's all about the details, and the details still need to be defined.
Okay, we will
So,
come back in 6 months
yes.
and ask the question. Xavier, what's your perspective?
No, I think in the new framework, yes, it's more investment focused, but it's also more sharing investment. And sharing investment between all the operators on the market is very important for us. On a passive way, not sharing the active part. And so with this new framework, we think that it gives to other, in France we have already this framework, but I think it gives to other countries the ability to have a new operator which can appear and create new business in this, mostly in the fiber deployment. It means also for the incumbent to have all the investors, and which means maybe at the end of the day a better return on the investment. And I think it's a great framework. There's only one thing I think is important. It's to give more power to the local regulator, because if you have only a view from Brussels, it's great, but you have always small differences between countries, and having locally a regulator, independent regulator, which give is small things which adds small things in the framework, which can, at the end of the day, create something bigger and better.
Great, thank you. Sam, do you have a view?
Well, I don't have as much skin in the game as the operators here, but I maybe just point to something we've seen in other countries, just to echo the comments from a moment ago. So at the national level in the US, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, regulates for the entire country, but we see a lot of interest from the individual states within the US who have very, very specific requirements. So Hawaii, for example, is a state we're talking to very, very closely at the moment. They're very, very distant from the rest of the US. So they have a very different set of goals and requirements that they'd like to see met for themselves. And there's certainly going to be countries not too dissimilar to that kind of mindset here in Europe. But regardless whether it's regulation, regulatory focused or investment focused, ultimately, and perhaps I'm a bit biased here, I'm going to say you absolutely need to measure it.
Thank you. I was then going to there are other questions that have come through by electronically, but I was going to open the discussion again to the floor. And there's one question again to my right. You got the microphone, please? If you can just say who you are.
Nathalie Stuyver, journalist for the French media context. I have two questions indeed. For Free and for KPN, can you explain us what will change concretely with the proposal of the Commission on the frequency? Can you give me an example for your national situation, or in Italy or wherever, where the proposition of the Commission will change something for you? That's the first question. And the second one, what in the proposition of the Commission about BEREC may change the situation of BEREC, of Ofcom after the Brexit? I mean, what will be your position in this agency or not agency?
Okay, I can just be grateful that Brexit did not come up until 2:30. So the first question I think is for Xavier and for Ilko, and I think the question is, what concretely, specifically in the proposals from the Commission, I think particularly on the question of frequency, so on spectrum, is going to change your life commercially, operationally?
No, so I think you wanted to talk about Italy. It's one case. No, in Italy you have one case. It's that if you ask the country, they don't want to give you the new spectrum, the 700 megahertz, before 2020. I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or maybe never. And it's an issue for a new entrant like us in Italy. So so we were hoping that the the new framework will give us access to this spectrum before 2020, but it seems that it maybe will not happen like we thought it should have been. But when we look at spectrum, we are always scared that at one part, you know, in a market, usually the incumbent is the richest operator. He has a lot of money, and very often he doesn't want to have a lot of competition in his own market, which it means he's ready to pay high amount of money to protect his own business. And as I told you, the politicians in the country, they always need more money. So it's always a complicated discussion between having competition and, for the country, having more money. So I'm not sure in this case the new framework give us a lot of new things, and we have already the exception of Italy for the 700 megahertz, and it's an issue for us.
Thank you, Xavier.
Well, the intentions of the new regulation is very positive, but as I said earlier, it's all about the details, and I would have expected more details on harmonization of timing when the spectrum comes available for operators, and I would have expected also harmonization on auction rules, so there's a more fair way of distributing the available spectrum. And now it's still all a sort of open. On a high level, it's a step in the right direction, but yeah, looking at the facts and the details, it still will be a huge uncertainty going forward.
Helpful. And I'll take the question from me on Brexit and BEREC as an agency. I mean, it's obviously BEREC becoming an agency is obviously a proposal. It's not a decision. I think certainly my perspective in Ofcom is that BEREC works very effectively in its current constitution as a network rather than an agency. However its status is at the end of these discussions, Ofcom will continue to be as involved in Europe as we are today, and that's incredibly crucial because the companies that we regulate operate in Europe or have European ownership. So regardless of the status of BEREC, we will be very involved. I happen to believe personally that it works very well as a network. I wanted to move on, and I wanted to take the liberty of asking a question myself that hasn't come up yet in the discussion over the last hour or so, which is the communities who are potentially left behind. Now, this is probably less of an issue in the Netherlands, where you're at 99% prospectively on 4G, but also in connectivity. For many of our countries, connectivity really is about how do you ensure that actually still a significant proportion of the population get any sort of access to a decent broadband or decent mobile service. And Sam, obviously you will have surveyed this in great detail. I wonder whether the panel has a view or observations about how we use these discussions to ensure that we do get universal, high quality, future-proofed services. And I thought perhaps I might start with Pilar on this.
Well, I think it is a matter, it has a double dimension. One is inside each member state, inside each country, and then comparatively, among different member states. So let's say integration and to be inclusive in terms of the digital market, the digital single market has to be with the units of member states compare among them. And on the other hand, we have the specific problem inside each member state. For the first, for the more European dimension, I think has much to be with the promotion of a common set of, let's say, at minimum, high coordinated, approaches. So when we're dealing with spectrum, it has to be with that. I mean, it has to be with also with the vision to integrate, to be inclusive with all member states, not to, given the differences we have. And we're dealing with the member states per se. I think up to some extent it's quite a matter of their own member states, and their own national regulators and policies, government develop in so many different aspects, from skills to infrastructure. So that's the two dimensions, has different regulatory approach or let's say, self-regulation approaches.
So do you see it very much, because what's interesting from the proposals is that they set a very high bar in terms of how one might see a universal service obligation in terms of just the very, very high speeds. But you see the implementation of that being very much up to the responsibility of the member states. Well,
I think in terms of the people less include in all this digitalization, situation and phenomenon and development, then you have to call the attention. But in most aspects, you have to really deal with at a national level. So you have this set of goals, and then boosting investment for networks, and then spectrum management, highly coordinated, and so on. So but then you have a huge room, and the most important one at that level inside the own member states.
Thank you.
I believe that it's all about local markets, because the differences are that huge that you can't design a regulatory framework that fulfills the needs of all the different customer groups in mostly the rural areas. That's one. And secondly, I believe that technology will support the opportunity to offer also in rural areas higher speed broadband in 1, 2, 3, 4 years from now than today. So the problem will become smaller, but at the end we will end up with some groups of customers that in that case it will be very, very expensive to offer them high speed broadband.
And do you see the government filling in the last bit of the gap?
Well, I think that's the only way to meet EU target of having for everybody high-speed broadband available, because private companies, large or small, will not be able to fund the investments to offer that particular group of customers high-speed broadband.
Xavier, do you agree?
Yeah, I think you have to think the universal coverage, and I think you have three levels. The first level is competition. When you have competition and competition can earn money, you have a business, you have network. So it's very easy. The second layer, if you don't have enough, if the competition is not possible, which means everybody has his own network, I think the market and all the competitors and all the operators on the market they have to share their network to create something together. It's what we have in France for mobile. In the non-dense area, in the rural areas, we are sharing our network. And I think it's something good because you divide the cost of the network but by the number of operators. And it allows to have network somewhere where it's not possible. And at the end, the last point, it's of course, if you cannot have these two cases because it's not profitable, you need to have state aids to create and to fund the creation of a network in this kind of place. But you have another way, which is a universal service, which means giving access to everybody, whichever are their revenue, whichever the money they have, give access to the telecom and to the telecom and to the data and to the internet. And I think that, and it's what I saw, for example, in France, that the universal service was very inefficient in Europe. I can give you only an example. When we entered the mobile market in France in 2012, our price were 5 times less expensive than the price of the universal service for mobile. So usually the market is more efficient than the universal service.
Very helpful, thank you. Sam, do you have any reflections?
Just briefly to echo the 2 previous comments, particularly around technology playing catch up. Well, not catch up, but technology being able to help with this. As Ilko talked about earlier, years ago, DSL services like DSL, 2 meg to the home, something like this. Nowadays, as you say, with G.fast hitting 300-400 meg, it's incredible, and certainly don't doubt it'll go beyond that. Equally, at the other end of the spectrum, but not intended, we have satellite services which had also improved massively in recent years. When we first started measuring satellite services in the US a few years ago, latency was north of a second. Nowadays, the generation that we have are down to 500, 600 milliseconds, and it's actually, it's almost, well, you can use it for many interactive services and it performs quite well. So I think technology will play a big part in this as well.
Let's keep optimistic. But I want to go back to a question that's been sent in, and perhaps this is a question on which we ought to vote. So the question is whether we believe, the panel believes that competition, investment, regulation go hand in hand as happy bedfellows, or are in conflict with one another. Remember, you've got a room full of regulators here too today. Maybe I can ask whether anybody would like to challenge the idea that competition and investment and regulation can coexist happily, or perhaps are even necessary for each other.
It depends. Looking at the Netherlands and specifically the consumer market, there competition, investments and regulation go hand in hand, but looking at the business market, where we as KPN had to take the decision a few years ago to stop investing in fiber to the offices in business parks because of regulation, there it didn't go hand in hand, and that has recently changed, but for a few years we had to stop investing in fiber in business parks.
And Ilko, can you be more specific about the regulation that was the blockage?
It was a combination of wholesale and retail regulation. So as part of the wholesale regulation, when we took the decision to invest in a business park in fiber, we had to make the announcement a few months before the investments and a few months before the services would be available. Prices were known because it was wholesale regulated, and on the same hand, the end user services were retail regulated. So competition exactly knew our price levels, and they knew the wholesale price levels. So we invested in business parks, and competition used the wholesale services, designed their retail services 5-10% below the KPN prices, and everybody would buy the fiber services of competition using our investments, and the hit rate of our sales force was almost zero in business parks where we had invested in fiber. So we said we will not continue to invest fiber in business parks anymore.
And what happened then? Was the retail price regulation was then dropped?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Xavier, you're going to be nice to regulators.
No, I think the most important thing is regulation. If you don't have regulation, you don't have competition. It's your case on the other hand, but you had a bad regulation where you didn't want to invest. So first thing, you need to have regulation. If you have regulation, you can have competition, and when you have competition, you have investment. And I'm not sure it's working, they are going hand in hand, but you need regulation, then you have competition. Then you have competition, then you have investment. For me, it's one behind the other.
Great, fantastic. I'm going to take another question that's just come in from Magnus Franklin. Is Magnus? Hi, Magnus, just at the back from MLEX. Most member states have still not implemented the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive, although it did come in this summer. Does anyone care? Well, I guess maybe it's tautological. If you cared about it, you would have implemented it. When you think about your commercial strategy, again, perhaps thinking particularly for KPN and Free and Iliad, does it feature in terms of helping to take out some of the costs for network investment, or actually is your passive access already, particularly for Free, so good?
I'm completely sorry, I don't know this directive.
Well,
so
I think that's a good answer.
So I have to work more.
So this is a new directive which...
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Which gives investors access to telecommunications infrastructure, but also the infrastructure of utilities. So the purpose is obviously to try to take out some of the cost for new investments, new network investment. Now, I think the very fact that the chief executive and founder of Free hasn't heard of the directive is probably some lessons for us today.
No, if it's pro-competition, we are very happy with it. So I think it's pro-competition, so I chair. I think it will happen fast and quick.
Thank you. Does it feature for KPN?
No, I'm having exactly the same view. So if it supports competition, then it will improve services, investments, etc.
But I think it's fascinating for those of us who are sort of policy makers or helping to be lawmakers. Actually, the operators with the money in the bank, that this is not a well-known directive. So I think that's quite an interesting lesson for us today. Next question also that's been sent in by email, again on spectrum, lots of interest today, is how can we ensure that the negotiation on spectrum doesn't become a dead end? This question about subsidiarity seems to be very much at the heart of the proposals and discussions around frequency and spectrum. Peter, how do we make sure that there's a conclusion?
I think the question was exactly how can negotiation on spectrum not become a dead end?
Exactly.
That's a key, question in some way. Well, I'll try to approach a bit, but I think we have to consider, as I said at the very beginning of my speech, that we are in another absolutely different moments of the digital development. Economy and society. And if we face the debate on spectrum in terms of better coordination on, let's say, trading, sharing, licensing, and many other aspects, with the same mentality that it was done previously, then it's going to be a disaster. Then that will be a failure at the end. I think it's crucial if we want to really get the step forward we need is that not only, let's say, regulators, the European Parliament, the Commission, number of stakeholders of the electronic communication sector is involved or are involved, but as well the other sectors that are going through a process of digitization, they can also, let's say, play a role in demanding such a, high level of coordination and spectrum. I'm thinking in so many industries, from the car industry to, let's say, energy sector in many different aspects, from energy efficiency to others, from the health sector to research, education, and other. I think there's a need for all this to really, in some way or another, try to be pushing for, boosting for, get this jumping, step in this occasion. So that will be great if there is a kind of more comprehensive, let's say, attention to this aspect of the spectrum management at the European level, up to some extent, and keeping, of course, ownership and, and money.
Great, thank you very much. We are in the last few minutes and probably time for one or two questions, and I just wanted to check with colleagues in the room whether there are, I'm just going to pause because I think you've asked one at the beginning, whether one up to my left, and I'll take that with one of the questions that's also come through by email. Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Stephen Howard of HSBC. I'd be very curious to learn of what the panelists think of the proposals on voluntary separation that are contained in the framework review text, and whether the panelists think that separation either of the voluntary variety or that of a more coercive form is actually likely to encourage investment. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to take the question about reflections on the voluntary separation proposals with the final question that's been sent to us by email, which is around if regulators take a tech-neutral view, doesn't that just favour the incumbents? And actually, it segues quite nicely into the voluntary separation issue. Who would like to?
I'm not sure we will have the same point of view. But
I hope we don't. Who would like to? Xavier?
We know that the end game will be the FTTH. Okay, we know that we will have fiber everywhere. It's the end game. For the next 50 years, today, the bandwidth we can have on the fiber is so high that we can think, and when we see the way consumers are hitting data and the way they are increasing year after year, we know that for the next 50, 60, 70 years, FTTH will win. So it means that the regulator will be not tech neutral because it will be FTTH. So we have only one what technology which will be used. So the question we can ask, is it useful to have, for example, in Paris, we have four FTTH network. I think it would have been more useful to take this money, to all invest in only one network in Paris and to use our money to create network in other parts of France in more rural areas. But it wasn't the case. So I think it's more clever to try to do that. But now we can understand that an incumbent, they think they have an advantage and they want to keep this advantage, but it's not for a country a good point of view. I think it's not a good point of view.
Very helpful. And Xavier, do you have a view about the way in which the Commission is thinking about voluntary separation proposals in the...
Who will voluntarily want to separate his network from his activity? So, yes, let's talk.
It's an interesting live question in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, but I think if you ask to British Telecom, they don't have the same point of view that you have. But you can always make papers about this thing, but at the end, it's a political or company point of view, and on a company point of view, they have I think they don't have to do it, but I think on a political point of view, it will be the best thing for any country.
Very interesting. Any other comments from the panel?
In my view, it depends on the local situation. Looking at the Netherlands, where we have 95% coverage of cable, we were forced to invest in new technology, being in a part of the country fiber to the home, and with the latest copper technologies available, fiber to the curb. And I fully agree that at the end everything will be fiber to the home, but for the time being, fiber to the curb and bonded V+ with G.fast is enough to offer customers high-speed broadband they need today. And if there is no infrastructure competition, then in my view, regulation is needed to speed up the investments in fixed access.
And do you share Xavier's views on voluntary separation?
I really don't see why that makes a difference, both from an investment point of view and also from a altnet point of view, because it makes no difference.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask then Sam and Peter final comments for this afternoon?
On this particular topic?
Yes, please.
Or, well, sure. I think the only danger here, if you lose the neutrality, is new services that come along. If there are new services which require extremely high bandwidth or extremely low latency real-time services, you create an even greater divide than we have at the moment. But I agree, we have to be pragmatic. The end game is always going to be fibre to the home, and until then we're going to be, basically it'll be a patchwork quilt of VDSL, G.fast, DOCSIS, satellite, 5G here and there, but eventually it will be fibre to the home everywhere.
Thank you. Peter, you have the very last word.
Yes, well, I think well, in the same, the same issue and item we have, expressing your opinion now. I think on the one hand, yes, the possibility of those new services is something to be seen. I mean, this is not, we are not, in terms that us recommend the functional separation or this. I think you can find examples of different kind. You mentioned your country. I have to say that in a country like Spain, which this is my home country, competition and deployment of fiber in this case and infrastructure were hand in hand. So this is an example, and I don't think that it is a situation which require some kind of decision at all right now. The framework review, this one goes in other direction, is covering other items. So I don't think to enter into this debate, will help so much to really get an successful debate on a decision on this, frankly, because it's not we contaminate again with something like that, and I don't think it's the case now, So.
Great, thank you very much indeed. We are out of time and at time. Can I just end by giving a huge thank you to everybody on the panel for such terrific, insightful contributions this afternoon. I also wanted to give a huge thanks, particularly to those who've asked questions, but actually just for being here and being part of the debate this afternoon that's going to run for some months onwards, as the next 18 months of the DSM is going to be a very, very fruitful and important time for all of us. Thank you so much indeed.